Hello, this is Matt from Oko. Welcome to the second instalment of our guide to Google Publisher Console. In the first part, Andrea talked about how to enable the console, and we showed you how to do that. So in this part, we're actually going to have a look at what it does. There's a third part coming. In that, we'll guide you through some actual tips on practical applications for Publisher Console. So do sign up for our monthly newsletter if you want to be notified when that's available to watch. So we're going to start off by looking at what I call the public functions of Publisher Console. That's those parts that you can access on any site that uses Google Publisher tags. There's also private functions. You can only use those if you're actually logged into the GAM account that's used on the page. I'll cover those in the second half of this video in a few minutes. But on the public side of things, for the example, I'm going to use a page here from The Guardian. So The Guardian, that's not an account that I've got any access to. Much as I'd love to have a poke about. It's just, if you're using Google Publisher Console, you can look at any page on the web that's using the Google Publisher tags and get a certain amount of information back from it. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to start off by looking at that. And I've chosen The Guardian mostly because it's generally a pretty good example of an ad setup. So I'm expecting to not get any kind of nasty surprises as I go through that. So here's a fairly typical news page from The Guardian. As we can see, there's a number of ad units on there. So I'm just going to open up the Publisher Console. I've got that saved as a bookmarklet in the toolbar because I use Publisher Console quite a lot. I find that as a nice, easy way to access it. If you want to see how to set that up the same way, do go back and see part 1 of this guide. So if I click that, as we can see, the Publisher Console opens up and we immediately get some information about what's going on there within the publisher tag. So here it is. This is the console here at the bottom of the page. Just a general bit of acclimatization to it. See what's going on. We can it can be a bit jumpy sometimes, but we can make this bigger. Let's get a bit more review of what's going on and smaller. We can switch between the two main tabs, the ad slot and the page request tab, which we're going to go through shortly. And if you want to, we can close it again. So that's just general navigation. I'm just going to open it up again. So the first section we're going to look at is the ad slots tab. This is what opens by default, as you just saw. This lists the ad slots available within GAM on the page, so we can see here. As we scroll down, each one of these, let's say how many have we got? We've got 9 on this page. We can see each one of these is numbered and has been given a colour as well. These colour codes, you can see already that this matches up. So add unit 1 or add slot 1 here, and we can see that's with unit 1 on the page as well. So the information it gives us on each of these ad slots, the first thing it's going to tell us just here is the name of that ad unit and the path if we're using nested tags as well. So we can see this is the Google Ad Manager publisher code. And then that's the path to find it. Really useful if you want to know sort of where the ad slots come from. Beneath that, we can see the slot sizes. So as we see, this is number 1, blue, it relates to this unit up here. And this has been available as a 1x1, a 2x2, 728, 90, 940, 230, and so on. And a bit of extra information is an out of page unit. No, the format's a div, so my ad manager. Overlay status shows us whether or not the Publisher Console has put an overlay on it, which we can see up here. So this is the overlay with information. We'll talk about what that information is in a few minutes. It just shows us whether it was able to show the that overlay or not. And then we can also see how long it's taken to fetch that creative and how long to render it as well. The ad fetch count is useful if we've got units that are refreshing. We usually get one on The Guardian. I've managed to pick a page that it's not. If that unit was on a 30-second for refresh and we sat here for a couple of minutes, we'd obviously see that starting to count up, that ad fetch count every time a new creative was displayed in there. Iframe type, fairly self-explanatory. And we've got a query ID here as well. These query IDs can be really useful when it comes to diagnosing issues around creatives and where they've come from. So it says here, if you contact your account manager if you've got concerns about the content or behaviour of the delivered creative. But it's a way of tying that creative back to where it's come from. If we just have a little scroll down, I'm just going to see whether there's any that, yeah, here's one with warning. So we can see if there's been any unexpected behavior within one of those ad slots, that will also be shown. So we can here see here that ad slot 4, the ad unit failed to fetch. So not sure if we can see that one or not. 1, 2, no, 3, 4. So that's the point. We can't see it. It's just showing as a blank for us. That could be any number of reasons, for trafficking or whatever. But and it's probably expected on this page. But we can see here that it hasn't managed to come up with something to display. For each slot, we also have some options here. Most of these are useful once we're logged in, so we'll talk about those later. But at the moment, Open Creative in the new window is the most interesting. So that was that created from that first, scroll back up, from that first ad slot up here. If we ever want to view the creative standalone, it could be really useful if it's being overlapped by layout. We want to check it out or whatever. So we just click that, that just opens up in a new window, and that's perfectly fine to do. So that's the main views that we can see from that initial ad slot view. At the same time as that, we're seeing the overlays, which we mentioned. So Publisher Toolbar will attempt to put an overlay over every ad manager ad that's displayed on the page. It's not always able to do that. It's not 100% foolproof. Some layouts can cause problems, but it's pretty reliable, and it seems to have got better as well. Also, overlays will obviously only be shown if the ad unit actually renders, as we saw with that example just now. We've got an ad unit that's been defined, or slot that's been defined, and we haven't been able to fill it with a creative. It's not going to, or the ad unit's not been rendered. It's not going to then have a corresponding overlay. So the overlays themselves, as we can see, they're shown semi-transparent so that we can see the creative underneath. If we want to just be able to read that a little bit clearer, we can hover over at any point. It'll expand to give us a bit more room, and it'll sort of turn it to a solid colour so that we can see it more clearly. And as we said before, we can see the sequential numbering of the units 1 and the colour coding are there so that we can easily tie the ad slot definition to the actual ad unit on page. If we look at the information within that overlay, the advertisement line there, that's part of their layout on this page. That's not part of this overlay. But what can we see? We can see the first bit of information we're getting here is, sort of what line item type this came from. In this case, direct sold. You will often see dynamic allocation in there as well as one of the examples. I'm not sure if we will have one on this or not. No, obviously the Guardians, we might pull up another example in a bit. That's an example of when the overlay layouts can sometimes get a bit confused. Now the Guardian doing an awesome job of direct selling all their inventory, good on them. But yeah, you'll often see the other types in there as well, and as I say, the dynamic allocation is a key one. So that's that first piece, and then we've got this line here, which is the same as we saw in the ad slots. So we've got the publisher network ID here, if I can find it, followed by the path down as the name to that ad unit. Below that, we've got links to the creative and to the line item. So these are both elements that me as a non-authorized user on this account, I can't click through. If I try to click through to one of those, that Google knows I don't have permissions to go and view that. Obviously, I can't just go and click through other people's accounts. But we can have a look at those in a little while when we look at it on an account that we do have access to. So that's that first tab, the ad slots tab, and the overlays covered. The next tab we have is the page request tab. So the page request tab, and we can just obviously flip between those easily. The page request tab opens with summary information about the page request that has been made. So this is pretty self-explanatory, but can be useful at times. We can see the URL that we've called here. We can see exactly what browser and version I'm using. We can see the viewport, and we can see the property code, that DFP property code there. Beneath that, we can see a list of any warnings that we've got on the page. Just a little summary there with I'll break down what they are. This is one of the most common ones we see: add unit failed to fetch, which we saw also when we looked at the add slots. The other one we see quite commonly is when an add unit's been defined, but there's no corresponding div on the page. So again, these are often quite expected behaviours on the way we set up a page, but we know here for whatever reason this add unit ng failed to fetch. I think it was deliberately not called looking at the setup. We also see we've got an option to reload the page. This is more useful than you might initially think. So we can reload a page normally. That's pretty much like clicking refresh in your browser. Whole page and all the add units on it will reload. Interestingly, you can see the number of warnings has changed now, but it's the same issue. We can also choose to reload the page without the ads. So, and now we can see, okay, if the ads aren't there, obviously those warnings disappear because they were part of the ad call. And we can see what the layout's like without the ads. We can check what our load times are like in those cases, for instance. The third option is that we can call all the ads, but actually not render them. So really useful in diagnosing layouts and stuff. But in the third part of this guide, we can talk a little bit more about how to use some of these specific options in a useful way. So that's the warnings, that's the reload options. We can see summary time here of how long it took to fetch and render. Obviously I've got 0 on render because I chose not to render them. Let me just reload normally. So I can talk about the ads again. So we can see obviously the time's now gone up, 28 seconds to render them this time. So the final piece of information we've got within this tab is the timeline. So the timeline shows us everything that's happening within the Google Publisher tags on this page from when it's first loaded, and each step and how long it's taken for it to happen, or what timestamp it happened. Really useful in a number of ways. We can look at all sorts. So for instance, if I look here, there we go. We can see how key values are being set within the page. So really good to know whether we've set things the way we're wanting it. So they've set some targeting attributes here. And also these timings, if we scroll down, we might be looking for what caused the slowdown on the page. We might look for, just look and see if there's a big jump. No, Guardian doing things pretty well. But we could have a look at, what's causing delays, where things are slowing down, if that was happening. Although, as we say, Guardian being a great example of getting it right, so nothing to show here. But that's it, that's the page request. We're looking at everything that's happening during that page load with regards to Google Publisher tags. So that's what happens if we look, as I call it, publicly. So I'm looking at that without having access to Guardian's Ad Manager account. We get a few more options or a few more features if we then do that when we're logged into an account. So if I switch to a little test site of ours, so this is one which is now using a GAM account that I am logged into. So we get a few more options. The first one is if we look at the overlays again. So now these links to creative and line item are available to us. So rather than just getting that error, you're not authorized message, we can actually click through on these. So the first one is the creative. If I click on that, I can go load straight into Ad Manager with the creative open, the one that we've just been seeing. So for instance, direct campaigns where you've got issues with them, going straight into there, but whatever it might be, we can go and change the settings in there. We can see exactly what should be happening. Likewise, we can go straight into the line item. And we can know which line item delivered that creative, and we can go and check the settings or change the settings of that. If we come away from the creative and go back to the ad slots, all the information is similar to what we saw before, but we mentioned these links here. So open creative in a new window we showed, but being logged in, we can also now open the ad unit in Ad Manager. So I can go straight to that ad unit definition. Or I can open up the ad request simulator with the delivery diagnostics link. And obviously from here you can then go in and change those settings and use it as you normally would that tool. We also similarly have available this button. So this shows whether we're logged into the account or not, but we can actually use it without getting the authorized error because we're now logged in. So I can also open the delivery tools and start inspecting that for all those ad slots on the page. There's a few additional options within the tool. The first one that sort of stands out is the audit this page button. If we click that, that URL will load in the Google Ads audits for Lighthouse tool. We'll definitely talk about this tool in a separate piece of content on the site because it's a really useful addition now for publishers. But we can see we can access that straight away from any particular page. So if we suspect that there's performance issues on the page, on mobile or desktop, we can go and have a look and see what's causing that. As I say, we'll definitely cover that. Get yourself subscribed to the newsletter. Really useful tool, so we'll definitely cover that soon. But you can access it immediately from any page there without having to cut and paste the URL in. And then the final option we have is the settings cog. So the settings cog, you can switch for language here if you prefer to use the Publisher Console in a different language. And you can also toggle the overlays on and off from here. I always think this settings, it feels like it's in slightly the wrong place, but it's quite useful if you're finding that those overlays, particularly if you've got one of those layouts which is causing problems with it, you could just toggle those on and off from there and carry on as you were from there. So that's our quick tour of Google Publisher Console. I think Publisher Console has become an essential tool for any publisher who is using Ad Manager. So hopefully this tool will just give you a bit of a taste for the fact it can be useful and maybe encourage you to start using the tool if you're not doing so already. If you'd like to see some practical examples of how our team use it to solve real issues, as I say, please do sign up for the newsletter. I'll put comments below so you get subscribed or whatever. So that we're going to cover that in the third part, show you some real examples of how we use it and dig into a couple of proper problems. Sign up for that, get to see that, and get a bit more out of the tool. So thanks a lot for your time. Thanks for watching the video, reading the blog post. Hopefully we'll see you when we do part 3.